The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the convoy as it wound through the narrow mountain pass in Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her tactical vest and checked her watch. Another routine supply run, or so she thought. The armored vehicle she rode in carried ammunition, medical supplies, and equipment for the forward operating base tucked deep in Taliban territory. As the convoy's ammunition specialist, Maria's job was simple: get the bullets to the boys who needed them, keep her head down, and make it home in one piece. Maria had joined the Army 5 years earlier, following in her father's footsteps. He had served 2 tours in Vietnam as a supply sergeant, and she grew up hearing his stories about the importance of logistics in warfare. Wars aren't won by heroes, he would tell her. They're won by the people who make sure the heroes have what they need. Those words echoed in her mind as she bounced along the rocky terrain, surrounded by cases of ammunition and spare parts. At 26, Maria was considered a veteran by most standards. She had completed 2 previous deployments, one in Iraq and this being her second in Afghanistan. She was known throughout her unit for her reliability, her attention to detail, and her ability to stay calm under pressure. What most people didn't know was that Maria had grown up hunting with her father in the mountains of Colorado. She could shoot better than most of the infantry soldiers she supplied, but that wasn't her job. Her job was to count bullets, not fire them. The convoy consisted of 4 vehicles, 2 Humvees providing security at the front and rear, and 2 larger trucks carrying supplies in the middle. Maria rode in the second supply truck with Private Johnson, a 19-year-old kid from Ohio who was on his first deployment. Johnson was nervous, constantly checking his rifle and scanning the surrounding hills for threat. "Relax, Johnson," Maria said, noticing his fidgeting. "These runs are usually pretty quiet. The real action happens at night." Johnson nodded but didn't look convinced. He had heard the stories about IEDs, ambushes, and sniper attacks. Every soldier had. The mountains of Afghanistan were unforgiving, and the enemy knew how to use the terrain to their advantage. The radio crackled with routine check-ins from the convoy commander, Lieutenant Torres. "All stations, this is convoy leader. Radio check over." "Guardian 1 loud and clear," came the response from the lead Humvee. "Guardian 2, good copy," replied the rear security vehicle. "Supply 1 5x5, answered the lead truck. "Supply 2, roger that," Maria responded for her vehicle. The mountains stretched endlessly in all directions, their peaks disappearing into a hazy blue sky. The landscape was both beautiful and menacing, offering countless hiding spots for insurgents while providing little cover for the convoy below. Maria had made this run dozens of times before, but she never got comfortable. Complacency killed soldiers, and she had no intention of becoming a statistic. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew thinner and cooler. The narrow road carved into the mountainside barely allowed room for their vehicles, with a sheer drop-off on one side and towering rock walls on the other. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and everyone in the convoy knew it. "Hey, Sergeant," Johnson said, breaking the silence. "You ever think about what you're going to do when you get home?" Maria smiled. It was a question every soldier asked and answered 100 times during deployment. "My dad wants me to come work for his construction company. Says the Army taught me enough about logistics to run his supply operation." "That sounds cool. Better than this place, anyway." "I don't know," Maria said, looking out at the rugged landscape. "There's something about this job that gets in your blood. The responsibility, you know? Knowing that the guys on the front lines depend on what we're carrying back here." Johnson nodded, though Maria could tell he didn't fully understand yet. He would, given time. They all did eventually. The convoy had been moving for about 2 hours when Lieutenant Torres's voice came over the radio again, this time with more urgency. "All stations, we've got reports of increased activity in this area. Stay sharp and maintain intervals." Maria felt the familiar tightening in her stomach that came with heightened alert status. She checked her M4 carbine, ensuring it was loaded and ready, though she hoped she wouldn't need it. Her primary weapon was knowledge, knowing exactly where every round of ammunition was located, how to distribute it efficiently, and how to keep the supply chain moving even under fire. The convoy had been specifically tasked with resupplying Forward Operating Base Alpha, a small outpost that served as a staging area for special operations missions. The base was home to a mixed unit of Army Rangers and Navy SEALs, who conducted high-value target raids throughout the region. These elite soldiers required specialized ammunition and equipment that couldn't be delivered through normal supply channels. Among the cargo in Maria's truck were cases of match-grade sniper ammunition, specialized explosive breaching charges, and advanced communication equipment. She had personally inspected every item before loading, ensuring that each piece of gear met the exacting standards required by Special Operations Forces. The lead vehicle suddenly braked hard, causing the entire convoy to come to an abrupt stop. Maria grabbed her radio as Lieutenant Torres's voice filled the airwaves. "All stations hold position. We've got possible IED indicators ahead. EOD is moving forward to investigate." IED, improvised explosive device, the preferred weapon of insurgents throughout Afghanistan. These crude but deadly bombs were responsible for more coalition casualties than any other weapon. The explosive ordnance disposal team would have to carefully examine the suspected device, a process that could take hours and left the entire convoy vulnerable. "Johnson, get on the radio and update base camp on our status," Maria ordered. "Let them know we're delayed but proceeding as planned." As Johnson worked the radio, Maria climbed out of the truck to assess their situation. The convoy was strung out along a narrow section of road with little room to maneuver. High ground surrounded them on all sides, providing perfect overwatch positions for enemy spotters or snipers. If insurgents had planted an IED, they were likely watching the convoy right now, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. Lieutenant Torres approached her position, his face grim. "EOD says it's going to be at least an hour, maybe 2. The device looks sophisticated, possibly command-detonated." "Sir, we're sitting ducks out here," Maria replied. "If they've got spotters in those hills, they know exactly where we are." "I know, Sergeant, but we don't have much choice. The road ahead is the only way through, and backing down would take us through even worse terrain." As if to emphasize his point, the radio crackled with an urgent transmission from the rear security vehicle. "Convoy leader, Guardian 2. We've got movement in the hills behind us. Possible dismounts, over." Lieutenant Torres grabbed his radio. "Guardian 2, can you get a count on those dismounts?" "Negative, sir. Too much vegetation and rock cover. Could be one guy or could be 20. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, an IED blocking their path forward, possible insurgents moving into position behind them, and nowhere to go but straight up the sides of mountains that would challenge experienced climbers, let alone heavily loaded vehicles. Maria returned to her truck and began mentally cataloging the weapons and ammunition they carried. In addition to the specialized gear for the SEALs and Rangers, they had standard 5.56 mm ammunition for M4 rifles, 7.62 mm rounds for machine guns, and various grenades and explosives. If it came to a fight, they had the firepower to hold their own, but only if they could establish defensive positions. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Lieutenant Torres called over the radio. "I need you to inventory our heavy weapons ammunition. If we get hit, I want to know exactly what we're working with." Maria began her count methodically. 12 cases of 5.56 mm, 8 cases of 7.62 mm, 4 cases of .50 caliber for the heavy machine guns mounted on the Humvees, and 6 cases of 40 mm grenades for the Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher. It was enough firepower to level a small town, assuming they could bring it to bear effectively. But among all the standard military ammunition, it was the specialized sniper rounds that caught her attention. These weren't ordinary bullets. They were match-grade, hand-loaded rounds designed for extreme precision at long range. Each cartridge represented hours of careful preparation by skilled ammunition specialists, designed to give snipers the edge they needed in life-or-death situations. The cases contained several different calibers: .308 Winchester for the Army's M24 sniper rifles, .300 Winchester Magnum for longer-range shots, and the massive .338 Lapua Magnum rounds used by the most advanced sniper systems. Maria had seen the effects of these rounds during training exercises, watching paper targets disintegrate at distances that seemed impossible. As she continued her inventory, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The mountains around them were silent except for the wind, but she had learned to trust her instincts during her previous deployments. Something wasn't right. "Johnson," she called to her driver, "get ready to move this truck if I give the word." And make sure your rifle is locked and loaded." The young private's hands shook slightly as he checked his weapon, but he nodded with determination. Maria felt a surge of pride watching him overcome his fear. It reminded her of her own first deployment, when every shadow seemed to hide an enemy, and every sound could be the last thing she heard. The EOD team worked methodically on the suspected IED, their bomb suit-clad technician moving with careful precision around the device. Through her binoculars, Maria could see him examining wires and components, occasionally using specialized tools to probe and test different elements. It was dangerous, painstaking work that required absolute concentration. Meanwhile, the security teams in the Humvees maintained overwatch on the surrounding terrain, their heavy weapons trained on likely approach routes. The .50 caliber machine guns and Mark 19 grenade launchers provided devastating firepower, but only if they could identify targets in the maze of rocks and vegetation that covered the mountainsides. "All stations," came Lieutenant Torres's voice over the radio. "We've got confirmation from higher command. Intelligence indicates possible insurgent activity in this area over the past week. Multiple IED emplacements, and at least 2 documented ambushes of coalition forces." The news sent a chill through Maria's spine. They weren't just dealing with a random roadside bomb. This was a coordinated effort, possibly part of a larger operation designed to disrupt coalition supply lines in the region. She thought about the soldiers waiting at Forward Operating Base Alpha, counting on the supplies her convoy carried. Without the specialized ammunition and equipment, upcoming missions would be compromised or canceled entirely. The ripple effect of a successful ambush would extend far beyond the immediate casualties. "Sergeant," Johnson said quietly, "do you think we're going to make it out of this?" Maria looked at the young soldier, seeing her own fears reflected in his eyes. But she also saw determination and a willingness to do his duty despite his fear. It was the same look she had seen in countless soldiers over the years, the look of someone who had accepted the risks but remained committed to the mission. "We're going to be fine, Johnson," she said with more confidence than she felt. "We've got good people watching our backs, and we're carrying enough firepower to handle anything that comes our way." As if summoned by her words, the radio crackled with another transmission from the EOD team. "Convoy leader, EOD actual. We've got a problem here. This device is more sophisticated than we initially thought. It's going to take significantly longer to clear." Lieutenant Torres's response was immediate. "EOD actual defines significantly longer. At least 4 hours, sir. Maybe more. This thing has multiple components and fail-safe mechanisms. We need to bring in additional equipment and personnel." 4 hours. Maria felt her heart sink. 4 hours sitting in the open, surrounded by high ground, with confirmed insurgent activity in the area. It might as well have been 4 days. The enemy would have more than enough time to position fighters, coordinate their attack, and choose the perfect moment to strike. The radio came alive with chatter, as Lieutenant Torres coordinated with higher command, requesting additional security and possibly an alternate route. But Maria knew there was no alternate route. The mountain passes in this region were limited, and most were even more dangerous than their current position. She climbed back into the truck and began double-checking her equipment. Her M4 carbine was clean and functional, with 6 magazines of ammunition. She carried a 9mm pistol as a backup weapon, along with several fragmentation grenades and smoke grenades. Standard loadout for a supply sergeant, designed more for personal protection than offensive operations. But as she looked at the cases of sniper ammunition surrounding her, Maria couldn't help but think about her childhood hunting trips with her father. Those early morning expeditions into the Colorado mountains, learning to read wind and weather, to judge distance and compensate for bullet drop. Skills that had seemed like simple recreation at the time, but now felt like preparation for something much more serious. Her father had been a patient teacher, never rushing her or demanding perfection. Instead, he had taught her to respect the weapon, to understand its capabilities and limitations, and most importantly, to never take a shot unless she was absolutely certain of the target and the consequences. "A rifle is a tool," he would say, "but it's the person behind it that makes the difference. You can have the best equipment in the world, but without skill, discipline, and judgment, it's worthless." Those lessons had served her well during military training, where her natural shooting ability had impressed instructors and peers alike. She had been offered opportunities to train as a designated marksman, or even attend sniper school, but she had chosen the supply specialty instead. It seemed safer, more stable, with better opportunities for advancement. Now, sitting in a truck full of ammunition while surrounded by hostile territory, Maria wondered if she had made the right choice. The specialized sniper rounds she guarded so carefully might be needed much sooner than anyone had anticipated, and the skills her father had taught her years ago might be the only thing standing between her unit and disaster. The sun continued its relentless march across the sky, and Maria realized that their delayed timeline meant they would likely be traveling through some of the most dangerous terrain during the evening hours, when insurgent activity typically increased. The cover of darkness that had once been their ally would now work against them, providing concealment for attackers while limiting the convoy's ability to spot threats. As she contemplated their situation, Maria made a silent promise to her father and to herself. If the moment came when her specialized skills were needed, she would be ready. The young woman who had learned to hunt in the mountains of Colorado was still there beneath the uniform and rank insignia, and she would do whatever it took to bring her soldiers home safely. The first shots came without warning, echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. Maria dove for cover behind her truck as bullets sparked off the armor plating and shattered the windshield above her head. The convoy had been stationary for 3 hours while the EOD team worked on the IED, and the insurgents had used every minute to position themselves for a devastating ambush. Contact! Contact! We're taking fire from multiple positions. Lieutenant Torres's voice crackled over the radio, barely audible above the roar of automatic weapons fire. Maria rolled onto the truck and began scanning the surrounding hills for muzzle flashes. The insurgents had chosen their positions well, using the rocky terrain and sparse vegetation to conceal their firing positions while maintaining clear lines of sight to the trapped convoy. "Johnson," she called to her driver, who was crouched behind the engine block. "Are you hit?" "No, Sergeant, but I can't see where they're shooting from." The heavy weapons on the Humvees opened up in response, their deep-throated roar adding to the chaos. The .50 caliber machine guns sent streams of tracers arcing toward the hillsides, while the Mark 19 grenade launcher began walking explosive rounds up the slopes where the enemy fire seemed heaviest. But the insurgents had clearly planned this attack carefully. As soon as the convoy's heavy weapons engaged one position, fire would erupt from a completely different location. They were moving constantly, using the terrain to mask their movements and avoid the devastating return fire. Maria heard the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle and saw one of the soldiers from the lead Humvee stumble backward, clutching his shoulder. Sniper. The insurgents had brought their own precision marksman to the fight, and he was systematically targeting the convoy's key personnel. "We need to suppress that sniper," Lieutenant Torres called over the radio. "Guardian 1, can you identify his position?" "Negative, sir. He's shooting from somewhere on the north ridge, but we can't pin him down. Every time we engage, he shifts position." Maria's mind raced as she analyzed the situation. The convoy was trapped in a kill zone with limited mobility, and no immediate prospect of reinforcement. The EOD team was still working desperately to clear the IED blocking their forward progress, while insurgent fire made it impossible to retreat. Through the chaos, she heard a new voice on the radio, calm and professional despite the circumstances. It was Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, a Navy SEAL who had hitched a ride with the convoy to return to Forward Operating Base Alpha after completing a reconnaissance mission. "Convoy leader, this is Thompson. I'm moving to the North Ridge to neutralize that sniper. I need covering fire from Guardian 2. "Roger that, Chief. Guardian 2, you copy?" Guardian 2 copies. Providing overwatch now. Maria watched as Thompson moved with fluid precision from cover to cover, his movements economical and purposeful. She had worked with SEALs before and never ceased to be impressed by their professionalism under fire. While other soldiers might panic or freeze up, these elite warriors seemed to thrive in chaos. Thompson carried an M24 sniper rifle, the same weapon system that used many of the specialized rounds Maria had been transporting. The .308 Winchester match-grade ammunition in her truck was specifically designed for rifles like his, capable of achieving sub-minute of angle accuracy at ranges exceeding 800 meters. The SEAL had made it about halfway up the ridge when the enemy sniper found his range, The crack of the high-powered rifle was followed immediately by Thompson spinning and dropping behind a cluster of rocks, his rifle flying from his hands to land several meters away. "Thompson is down! Thompson is down!" came the call over the radio. Maria saw the SEAL trying to drag himself toward cover, leaving a trail of blood on the rocky ground. His rifle lay exposed on a flat section of rock, too far away for him to reach, but tantalizingly close for anyone brave enough to retrieve it. The insurgent fire intensified, as if they sensed victory within their grasp. Rocket-propelled grenades began exploding around the convoy, adding their devastating power to the already overwhelming volume of small arms fire. One RPG struck the lead supply truck, causing a massive explosion that sent ammunition and equipment flying in all directions. "We're getting chopped up down here." Lieutenant Torres called over the radio, "I need immediate close air support." The response was not what anyone wanted to hear. "Convoy leader, be advised that air support is engaged with targets in another sector. Earliest availability is 30 minutes out." 30 minutes might as well have been 30 hours. At the rate they were taking casualties, there wouldn't be anyone left to rescue by the time the aircraft arrived. Maria made a decision that would change the course of her life forever. She grabbed her medical kit and began crawling toward Thompson's position, using whatever cover she could find to avoid the incoming fire. The wounded SEAL was more than 100 meters away across terrain that offered little concealment from the enemies above. "Rodriguez, what are you doing?" Lieutenant Torres called over the radio. "Going to get Thompson, sir. He's still alive, and we need that rifle. It's too dangerous." But Maria was already committed to her course of action. She had seen too many good soldiers die because someone was unwilling to take risks, and she wasn't about to let that happen today. Thompson was one of the best snipers in the military, and his rifle represented their only chance to neutralize the enemy marksman who was picking apart their convoy. She moved from rock to rock, boulder to boulder, using every scrap of cover available, while bullets whistled overhead and ricocheted off the stones around her. Her heart pounded so hard she thought the insurgents might hear it, but she forced herself to focus on the fundamentals of movement under fire that she had learned during basic training. When she finally reached Thompson, she found him conscious but badly wounded. A bullet had shattered his left shoulder, and he was losing blood at an alarming rate. His normally steady hands shook as he tried to apply pressure to the wound. "Chief, I'm here to get you out," Maria said, quickly assessing his injuries. Thompson looked at her with eyes that were already showing the effects of blood loss and shock. "Forget about me, Sergeant. Get that rifle and take out their sniper. He's positioned somewhere on the high ground to our north, probably using a 338 Lapua system based on the sound signature." Maria looked at the rifle lying exposed on the rocks. The M24 was a precision instrument capable of incredible accuracy in the right hands, but could she use it effectively? Her childhood hunting experience and military marksmanship training had given her solid fundamentals, but she had never engaged human targets at extended range under combat conditions. "I don't know if I can make those shots, Chief." Thompson grabbed her arm with his good hand, his grip surprisingly strong despite his injuries. "You can do this, Rodriguez. I've seen your range scores. You're a natural shooter, you just never had the opportunity to prove it in combat." Another RPG explosion rocked the convoy below them, and Maria could see that their situation was becoming desperate. Several vehicles were now burning, and the remaining security personnel were running low on ammunition. If something didn't change soon, they would be overrun. "There's a case of .308 match ammunition in your truck," Thompson continued, his voice getting weaker. "Hand-loaded rounds with 175-grain Sierra Match King bullets. They're zeroed for this rifle at 100-meter intervals out to 800 meters. Maria nodded, understanding the technical specifications even as her mind reeled from the responsibility being placed on her shoulders. She had transported those exact rounds dozens of times, knowing they were destined for precision marksmen like Thompson. She had never imagined she might one day have to use them herself. "The wind is running left to right at about 5 miles per hour, Thompson said, drawing on his years of sniper training even while wounded. "At 600 meters, you'll need to hold about 6 inches to the right to compensate. Remember, breathe naturally, squeeze straight back on the trigger, and follow through on every shot." Maria looked back toward the convoy where her fellow soldiers were fighting desperately to hold their positions. Then she looked at the rifle lying in the open and made her choice. She sprinted toward the weapon, zigzagging as bullets cracked past her ears and struck the ground at her feet. Her dive for the rifle was more desperation than technique. But it worked. She rolled behind a low stone wall with the M24 clutched against her chest, her hands already familiarizing themselves with the weapon's controls and adjustments. The rifle felt different from her standard M4 carbine. Heavier, more substantial, with a precision stock and high-powered scope that spoke of specialized craftsmanship. She quickly checked that it was loaded and ready, then began scanning the ridgeline for her target. Finding the enemy sniper would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. The mountains offered countless hiding spots, and an experienced marksman would know how to use every bit of available concealment. She would have to be patient, methodical, and incredibly lucky. The first priority was getting back to her truck to retrieve the specialized ammunition Thompson had mentioned. The standard military rounds in the rifle's magazine were adequate, but the match-grade cartridges would give her every possible advantage in what was likely to be the most important shooting of her life. She began working her way back down the slope, using the same cover that had protected her on the way up. But now she carried a different burden. Not just her own survival, but the lives of everyone in the convoy below. The return trip seemed to take forever, with enemy fire continuing to rake their positions. By the time she reached her truck, 2 more soldiers had been wounded, and their ammunition was running dangerously low. The insurgents seemed to sense victory, and their fire was becoming more aggressive and coordinated. Maria found the case of match ammunition exactly where she remembered storing it. The wooden box contained 20 rounds of .308 Winchester, each cartridge precisely manufactured to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. These were not mass-produced military rounds, but handcrafted tools designed for one purpose: delivering maximum accuracy at extended range. She loaded 5 rounds into the rifle's magazine, keeping the rest for future engagements. Each cartridge represented not just money and time, but the accumulated knowledge and skill of the people who had created them. Master gunsmiths, precision machinists, and ballistics experts had contributed to these rounds, and now their expertise was in her hands. "Rodriguez, what's your status?" Lieutenant Torres called over the radio. "Moving into position now, sir. I'm going to try to take out their sniper." "Roger that." All stations. Rodriguez is attempting to engage the enemy marksman. Provide covering fire as needed. The heavy weapons opened up again, raking the hillsides with suppressive fire designed to keep the insurgents' heads down while Maria moved into a shooting position. She found a spot among the rocks that offered both concealment and a clear line of sight to the north ridge, where Thompson believed the enemy sniper was positioned. Setting up the rifle properly was crucial. Maria remembered her father's lessons about building a stable shooting platform, creating a foundation that would allow the weapon to perform to its maximum potential. She used her pack as a rest for the rifle's stock and adjusted her position until the scope's crosshairs moved naturally across her target area. The scope was a work of art in itself, with crystal-clear optics and precise adjustment mechanisms that allowed for minute corrections in aim. Maria had used similar scopes during marksmanship training, but never under these conditions, with lives hanging in the balance and an enemy who was actively hunting her friends. She began systematically scanning the ridgeline, looking for any sign of the enemy position. A glint of sunlight on metal, a shadow that didn't belong, movement among the rocks. Anything that might reveal her target's location. Minutes passed without success. The insurgent sniper was either very well hidden or had already relocated to a different position. Meanwhile, the rest of the enemy force continued their assault on the convoy, and Maria could see that their situation was becoming increasingly desperate. Then she saw it, a small puff of dust kicked up by a rifle's muzzle blast, barely visible among the rocks about 650 meters away. The enemy sniper had just fired another shot, and for a brief moment, his position was revealed. Maria adjusted her aim point to compensate for the range and wind conditions Thompson had described. At 650 meters, the bullet would drop significantly from its initial trajectory, requiring her to aim several feet above her target to ensure a hit. The crosswind would push the bullet to the left, necessitating an equal compensation to the right. She controlled her breathing, allowing her body to settle into a natural rhythm while keeping the crosshairs steady on target. The fundamentals of marksmanship that had been drilled into her during training took over. Sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, and follow-through. The trigger broke cleanly. surprising her slightly as all good triggers should. The rifle's recoil was substantial but manageable, and she maintained her sight picture long enough to see the bullet's impact through the scope. The shot struck just to the left of where she had been aiming, indicating that she had either misjudged the wind or overcompensated for it. But more importantly, she had seen movement in the target area, the enemy sniper scrambling to a new position after her near miss. Maria worked the bolt action smoothly, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a fresh round. The enemy marksman would be more cautious now, knowing that someone was actively hunting him. But he had also revealed his general location, giving her a smaller area to focus on. The next few minutes developed into a deadly game of cat and mouse, with both snipers trying to locate and engage each other while avoiding return fire. Maria had the advantage of knowing approximately where her target was positioned, but the enemy had the benefit of experience and familiarity with the terrain. She was adjusting her position when another rifle crack echoed across the mountains, followed immediately by a cry of pain from below. The insurgent sniper had claimed another victim, this time one of the machine gunners whose suppressive fire had been keeping the other enemies at bay. The loss of the machine gun position seemed to embolden the insurgents, who began advancing down the slopes toward the convoy. If they succeeded in overrunning the defensive positions, it would be over for everyone. Maria knew she was running out of time. She had to find and eliminate the enemy sniper before the rest of the insurgent force could exploit their advantage. Everything depended on her ability to make an impossible shot under the worst possible conditions. She steadied the rifle and began her search once more, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether her fellow soldiers lived or died. Maria forced herself to remain calm as chaos erupted around the convoy below. The insurgents were advancing on multiple fronts, using the cover of smoke and dust to mask their movements as they closed distance with the trapped vehicles. Without the suppressive fire from the heavy machine gun that had just been silenced, the defensive perimeter was collapsing. Through her scope, she continued scanning the ridgeline where the enemy sniper was positioned. She had narrowed his location to a cluster of large boulders about 600 meters away, but pinpointing his exact position remained elusive. The insurgent marksman was skilled, using micro-terrain and shadows to remain nearly invisible while maintaining his ability to engage targets below. "All stations, this is convoy leader." Lieutenant Torres's voice crackled over the radio, strain evident in his tone. "We have multiple casualties and are running low on ammunition. I need that sniper neutralized immediately." Maria keyed her radio with one hand while maintaining her sight picture with the other. "Working on it, sir. He's somewhere in that boulder field on the north ridge, but I haven't been able to get a clear shot."
"Rodriguez, you need to understand our situation down here," Torres replied. "We've got wounded who need immediate medical evacuation, and our defensive positions are being overrun."
"That sniper is the key to this whole engagement. Without him coordinating their fire, we might be able to break contact and get out of here." The weight of responsibility settled even heavier on Maria's shoulders. She wasn't just hunting an enemy sniper anymore. She was trying to save the lives of everyone in the convoy. Every second that passed meant more casualties, more equipment destroyed, and less chance of anyone making it home alive. She adjusted her position slightly, trying to get a different angle on the suspected sniper location. As she did, her elbow knocked against one of the spent cartridge cases from her previous shots. The metallic clink was barely audible, but in the intense quiet of her focused concentration, it might as well have been a church bell. That tiny sound gave her an idea. The enemy sniper was looking for her just as intently as she was looking for him. If she could draw his attention, force him to expose himself for just a moment, she might be able to get the shot she needed. Maria carefully moved to a slightly different position, one that would be visible from the enemy's suspected location, but still provided her with adequate cover. She made the movement deliberately slow and obvious, hoping to catch the insurgents' attention without making it appear like an obvious trap. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Below, the sound of gunfire continued as the convoy's remaining defenders fought desperately to hold their perimeter. She could hear Lieutenant Torres on the radio, coordinating medical aid for the wounded and trying to establish communications with the inbound air support that was still 20 minutes away. Then she saw it, a brief glint of reflected sunlight from the boulder field, lasting barely a fraction of a second, but enough to pinpoint the enemy's position. The insurgent sniper had been scanning her area with his own scope, and the lens had betrayed his location. Maria immediately shifted her aim to the spot where she had seen the reflection. Through her scope, She could barely make out what appeared to be the outline of a rifle barrel extending from behind one of the larger rocks. The target was partially obscured, and at an extreme angle, but it was the first clear shot opportunity she had been given. She estimated the range at 640 meters, with a slight uphill angle that would affect the bullet's trajectory. The wind had picked up slightly since her last shot, now gusting at around 7 miles per hour from left to right. All of these factors would need to be calculated and compensated for in the brief window of opportunity she might have. Maria settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and allowing her heart rate to slow. She thought about her father's lessons from years ago, his patient voice explaining the fundamentals of long-range shooting. "The rifle will do its job if you do yours," he would say. "Trust your training, trust your equipment, and trust yourself." The crosshairs settled on her target, and she began the careful trigger squeeze that would send the 175-grain bullet on its precisely calculated path. The trigger broke cleanly, and the rifle recoiled against her shoulder as the shot thundered across the mountains. Through the scope, she saw the unmistakable impact of the bullet striking home, followed by the immediate cessation of return fire from that position. The enemy sniper's rifle fell silent, and for the first time in over an hour, no precision fire came from the ridgeline. "Target down," Maria called over the radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "The sniper is neutralized." With their precision marksmen eliminated, the insurgent attack began to falter. The remaining fighters, who had been coordinated and directed by the sniper's observations, suddenly found themselves disorganized and vulnerable to the convoy's return fire. Lieutenant Torres seized the opportunity immediately. "All stations, this is convoy leader. The sniper threat has been neutralized. Guardian 2, shift fire to the eastern slope and suppress those RPG teams. Guardian 1, I need you to push forward and secure the high ground." The heavy weapons roared back to life with renewed purpose, no longer forced to divide their attention between multiple threats. The .50 caliber machine guns and Mark 19 grenade launcher began systematically engaging the insurgent positions, their crews now able to focus on targets without fear of precision return fire. Maria maintained her overwatch position, scanning for any remaining threats while the convoy's counterattack developed. She could see insurgent fighters beginning to withdraw from their forward positions, their coordinated assault dissolving into individual survival as the tide of battle turned against them. "Rodriguez, outstanding work," came Thompson's weak voice over the radio. The wounded SEAL had managed to reach a radio and was monitoring the engagement despite his injuries. "That was a hell of a shot. You just saved all our lives." But Maria knew the engagement wasn't over yet. While the immediate sniper threat had been eliminated, there were still insurgent fighters in the surrounding hills, and the convoy remained trapped by the IED blocking their forward progress. "EOD actual. What's your status on that device?" Lieutenant Torres called over the radio. "Convoy leader. We're making progress but still need at least another hour. The device has multiple components and we're having to work around the damage from the firefight." An hour was still too long to remain in their current position. Despite their tactical success in repelling the immediate attack, the insurgents would likely regroup and return with additional fighters. The convoy needed to find a way to break contact and continue their mission. Maria began scanning the surrounding terrain through her scope, looking for alternative routes or defensive positions that might give them better options. Her elevated position provided an excellent view of the entire area, allowing her to spot potential threats or opportunities that weren't visible from the convoy's position below. "Sir," she called over the radio to Lieutenant Torres, "I can see a possible alternate route from up here. There's a goat path that parallels the main road about 500 meters to the east. It looks rough, but it might be passable for our vehicles. Can you provide overwatch while we investigate that route?" "I have a commanding view of the entire area from this position." As the convoy began preparing to investigate the alternate route, Maria reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in the past few hours. She had started the day as a supply sergeant, responsible for inventory and logistics. Now she was providing sniper overwatch for a tactical movement, having successfully engaged and eliminated an enemy marksman under combat conditions. The specialized ammunition she had been transporting was now serving its intended purpose, but in her hands rather than those of the trained snipers she had been delivering it to. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent years moving precision rounds from one place to another, never imagining she would one day depend on them for her own survival and that of her fellow soldiers. Through her scope, she watched as the convoy's scout team carefully picked their way along the alternate route she had identified. The terrain was challenging, with steep grades and loose rock that would test their vehicle's capabilities, but it appeared passable and would allow them to bypass the IED entirely. "Rodriguez, the route looks good," Lieutenant Torres reported. "We're going to start moving the wounded first, then the remaining vehicles. I need you to maintain overwatch until everyone is clear." "Roger that, sir. I'll stay in position until you're all safe." As the convoy began its careful withdrawal, Maria found herself thinking about the enemy sniper she had killed. She had never taken a human life before, and the reality of what she had done was beginning to sink in. The insurgent had been a skilled marksman, possibly trained by the same military forces that had once allied themselves with coalition troops. He had been someone's son, perhaps someone's father, fighting for what he believed was right. But she also thought about the soldiers in the convoy below, young men and women who had families waiting for them at home. Private Johnson, barely 19 years old and on his first deployment. Lieutenant Torres, who had shown tremendous leadership under impossible conditions. Chief Thompson, whose expertise had guided her successful shot despite his own critical injuries. The moral complexities of warfare were something every soldier had to grapple with eventually. Maria had heard the discussions in barracks and mess halls, the philosophical debates about duty, necessity, and the value of human life. Now those abstract concepts had become stark reality, measured in the weight of a trigger pull and the finality of a precisely placed bullet. "Convoy leader, this is air support," came a new voice over the radio. "We're approaching your position with 2 A-10 aircraft. What's your current situation?" "Air support, convoy leader. We've broken contact with the enemy and are withdrawing along an alternate route. We have one sniper providing overwatch from the North Ridge. Danger close fire missions may be required if enemy reinforcements arrive." Maria smiled grimly at being referred to as one sniper. A few hours ago, that designation would never have applied to her. Now it seemed as natural as her rank and serial number. The sound of approaching aircraft grew louder, and soon she could see the distinctive silhouettes of the A-10 Thunderbolt ground attack planes circling overhead. Their presence provided both immediate firepower and psychological reassurance. Even if insurgent reinforcements did arrive, they would find themselves facing some of the most devastating close air support aircraft in the world. "Rodriguez, the convoy is clear and moving toward the rally point," Lieutenant Torres reported. "You need to start moving to link up with us. We'll provide covering fire for your withdrawal." Maria took one last look through her scope, scanning the surrounding hills for any signs of enemy activity. The area appeared quiet, but she knew that insurgent fighters could remain hidden for hours or even days before striking again. Her successful engagement had likely saved lives today, but the broader conflict would continue long after this convoy reached its destination. She carefully disassembled her shooting position, police calling the brass from her expended cartridges, and securing the specialized rifle for transport back to the convoy. Each movement was deliberate and methodical, the actions of someone who had learned to respect both her equipment and the deadly serious nature of her new role. The movement back to the convoy took nearly 30 minutes, with Maria carefully picking her way down the mountainside while maintaining awareness of potential threats. The terrain that had provided excellent shooting positions also offered countless hiding spots for enemy fighters, and she couldn't afford to become careless now that the immediate crisis had passed. When she finally reached the convoy's new position, she was met by Lieutenant Torres and several other soldiers who had watched her impossible shot through binoculars. The looks on their faces were a mixture of admiration, relief, and something approaching awe. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Torres said, his voice formal but warm, "I'm putting you in for a commendation. What you did today was extraordinary, and I want to make sure it's properly recognized." Maria nodded her acknowledgement, but her attention was focused on the wounded soldiers receiving medical attention nearby. Chief Thompson was conscious and stable, his shoulder properly bandaged and immobilized. He caught her eye and gave her a weak thumbs up, the universal military gesture of approval. "How are you feeling about what happened up there?" Torres asked quietly, pulling her aside from the other soldiers. It was a question that every leader should ask after a soldier's first combat kill. Maria realized. The Army had protocols for dealing with the psychological aftermath of taking a life, resources designed to help soldiers process the experience and continue functioning effectively. "I'm okay, sir," she replied, and was surprised to find that it was mostly true. "I keep thinking about the soldiers whose lives were saved. That makes it easier to accept what I had to do." Torres nodded, recognizing the maturity and perspective in her response. "That's exactly the right way to think about it, Sergeant. You made a tough decision under impossible circumstances, and you executed it flawlessly. Everyone in this convoy owes their life to your actions today." As the convoy resumed its movement toward Forward Operating Base Alpha, Maria found herself riding in the lead vehicle with Chief Thompson and the other wounded soldiers. The specialized ammunition she had been transporting was now mostly expended, used for its intended purpose but by an unexpected operator. The M24 sniper rifle lay secured beside her, no longer an unfamiliar tool but an extension of her own capabilities. She had crossed a threshold during the engagement, transforming from a logistics specialist into something else entirely. The Army would undoubtedly want to capitalize on her demonstrated abilities, possibly offering advanced training and specialized assignments. But for now, she was content to watch the Afghan landscape roll past, thinking about the letter she would write to her father when they reached base. He had taught her to hunt in the mountains of Colorado, never imagining that those skills would one day save lives in the mountains of Afghanistan. She wanted to tell him that his lessons had mattered, that the patience and precision he had instilled in her had made all the difference when it counted most. The convoy reached Forward Operating Base Alpha just as the sun was setting behind the western peaks. The specialized supplies and equipment that had survived the ambush were quickly unloaded and distributed to the waiting special operations teams. The mission that had seemed so routine that morning had been completed, despite odds that should have made success impossible. As Maria helped unload the remaining ammunition cases, she reflected on how much her life had changed in a single day. She had started as Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, supply specialist and ammunition handler. She was ending it as something new entirely, a combat-proven sniper whose actions had turned the tide of a desperate battle. The young woman who had learned to shoot in the Colorado mountains had finally found her true calling, not in the supply depot or the ammunition warehouse, but behind the scope of a precision rifle, where skill, courage, and necessity had combined to create something extraordinary. Her father would be proud, she knew, and that knowledge was worth more than any medal or commendation the Army might eventually award her. The war in Afghanistan would continue, and there would be other convoys, other ambushes, and other moments when specialized skills would mean the difference between life and death. But Maria Rodriguez now knew exactly what she was capable of when the moment demanded everything she had to give. The rifle had done its job, just as her father had promised it would. But more importantly, she had done hers, and that made all the difference in the world.